On today's episode of ET, we talk with the Office of Undergraduate Admissions about how Maryland is navigating the new normal of recruitment, what can students expect, and how our applicants can stand out and stay competitive as they're finishing up their college applications. Hi, I'm Sebastian Chai-Onn, and our show is brought to you from the Department of Fire Protection Engineering here on the University of Maryland's campus. We're about halfway through the fall semester here at Maryland and weeks away from the first application deadline, both here and at many colleges and universities around the country. But with institutions closed for visitors, tours, and in-person events, the recruitment of applicants has shifted to an all-virtual environment. And with students being bombarded with email, social media posts, and invitations to webinars, colleges and universities are finding new ways to stand out and remain at the forefront of applicants' minds. Today, I'm joined by Shannon Gundy, who is the Executive Director from the Office of Undergraduate Admissions here at Maryland, to talk about how UMD is staying ahead of the game and what we can expect from this year's recruitment cycle. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I appreciate the invitation to join you.
So I want to start out by talking about some of the newest additions and changes to this year's admission cycle, specifically the test optional policy for 2021 and the decision to add the common application. What made the Office of Undergraduate Admissions decide to make these changes?
Well, one of the things that I think is important to know about the University of Maryland and the Office of Undergraduate Admissions in particular is that one of the things that is most important to us is ensuring that students have access to the university, not just through, our welcoming nature, but the steps that students have to go through to actually become students at the university, which primarily is the application for admission. And we wanted to ensure that there was nothing in the application process that prevented access to the full range of students that might be interested in the University of Maryland. One of the benefits of the Common App is the familiarity that lots of students have with the Common App and the ease with which students can apply to multiple institutions. So our decision to go to Common App was one, of course, that was made well before COVID was an issue, but the timing could not have been better. The fact that we chose to become members of the Common App at a time when students were struggling with access in a wide variety of arenas meant that our decision to become members of Common App at this particular point in time further ensured access to the University of Maryland. And the decision to go test optional was specific to COVID. It might be helpful for you and your listeners to know that over the past year, we actually did a validity study of the SAT. We want to make sure that anything that we're using as a part of the application review process is necessary and important and beneficial. We did an SAT validity study and found that the SAT actually does help to indicate which students will be most successful at the university. So our decision to use the SAT and ACT as a part of our admission process is a tested, well-founded, and well-documented benefit to us making good admission decisions. However, with the onset of COVID, we found that there were many students who didn't have access to be able to take the SAT in the same numbers and the same time with the same convenience that they had in the past, which meant that if we continued to require SAT and ACT as a part of our application review process, a number of really good, talented, strong, impressive students wouldn't have access to the University of Maryland. So the decision was actually pretty easy for us. We needed to make sure that we weren't doing anything to further prevent access for the university. So we had to change our process to allow that same kind of access to students.
Well, that's great to hear. One of the biggest questions that we have been getting from prospective applicants is how can they stand out from their peers and be competitive enough for admission to the University of Maryland? This has been especially emphasized in this cycle with, many students not being able to take these standardized tests or, having complete transcripts that may only show a pass-fail grading as opposed to letter grades or percentages, depending on where the students are coming from. So what do you say to these students who have these growing concerns for this year's application cycle?
It's always been the case that the student's academic performance in high school weighs more significantly than any other single factor in our application review process. The good news for students that are interested in the University of Maryland is that we have a holistic application review. It's never been the case that we just look at a GPA and SAT and say yes or no, we're going to offer this student admission or we're not going to offer this student admission. We want to look at everything that students present to us in order to get a full picture of who the student is. With that being said, the fact that students may have pass-fail grades, for example, for their spring semester of their junior year on their high school transcript. The reality is that they have many other semesters of graded work on their transcripts prior to that one semester where COVID prevented students from getting letter grades or number grades. So we're going to look at everything else that we have about the student. We're looking at the kinds of courses students take, the level of difficulty of those courses, and how well they performed in those courses. It's also the case that other information that students provide to us is critically important and is reviewed. So for example, if there's a student who was enrolled in courses in their junior year and they ended up having to get pass-fail grades in those courses, students and their teachers can tell us how the student was performing. The grades that students indicate or receive are provided by the instructors. So students can go to their instructors, and if they want to help themselves stand out in our process, they can have an instructor provide us with information that says, yes, the student earned a pass grade or a P in this individual course, but they were on track to earn an A. They were very strong. They participated. They were actively engaged and involved. So if students take that additional step, they can help provide us information that distinguishes them from among others. I think the bottom line is that students have the ability to control the information that we receive. So they can't take it for granted that we're just going to intuitively know the good things that are about them, that they'd like for us to include as a part of our review process, but they can provide us with that information. We know every single person was unable to participate in the things that they wanted to participate in through the spring and summer and even into the fall. Everybody is in the same situation. So no student is disadvantaged more than another, but they were involved in things before that. They've continued to be involved in things virtually. They need to tell us about the kinds of things that they were involved in, and they can tell us about the challenges that they faced. The reality is, I don't want to read 32,000 applications about the impact that COVID had on their lives. Everybody had the same impact. But what were you doing? What kinds of things were you passionate about? What kinds of things were you involved in? Students have to take the initiative to give us that information. The reality is that the students who take that additional time, who provide us with that level of detail, who provide us with supplemental information from teachers who can substantiate how strong they were as students, are going to have a benefit in the application review process.
Well, that's a very good point. I think a lot of students don't really realize that. I think for a lot of them, they're just very frazzled by this year's application process. And so
You're absolutely right.
Exactly. And so another common question that we're getting, especially here in the School of Engineering, is about the limited enrollment programs, or LEP as we call it internally. Could you talk a little bit about, exactly what are LEPs, mm-hmm. and how will this year's application impact or even help the review process?
Well, LEPs, or limited enrollment programs, are those programs that for internal specific reasons limit the number of incoming students that can be accommodated into those programs. Things that I want students to know about LEPs and the LEP process. Number one is that indicating an interest in an LEP on the application for admission doesn't impact the admission decision at all. Students are reviewed for admission first to the university without consideration of the area that they're interested in majoring in. We then look to see what the student wants to major in. So once we've evaluated the student for admission, we've decided, yes, we want to offer admission to the student. We look to see whether they're interested in an LEP. If they are, they're then reviewed for the limited enrollment program. If they meet the requirements for the program, they are admitted to the university and admitted into their LEP. If the students are not meeting the requirements for the LEP, they're still admitted to the university through Letters and Sciences. And while in Letters and Sciences, students can work to gain eventual admission into the LEP. The second thing that I want students to know is that for those students who aren't admitted directly into the LEP, what they need to do is essentially what they would need to do to stay in the LEP anyway. So students are, whether they're admitted directly or whether they're working to gain admission, are pretty much evaluated on the same level. So it's important for students to know that also what they need to do to gain admission into the LEPs is clearly articulated for them. So they can look to see what it is that they need to do in order to gain admission into the LEP. And it's also helpful for them to know that the courses that they take in order to gain admission into the LEP are often the same classes that students who are in the LEP are taking. They're sitting next to the students that are in the LEP. They're sitting with the same instructor. The instructor doesn't know who's directly admitted into the LEP and not. So there really is very little disadvantage, if any, for students who aren't directly admitted into the LEP. And it's a pretty clear and easy process. And then there are folks on campus who are working with students to help them gain admission into the LEP. And that's the advantage of being in Letters and Sciences. You've got academic advisors who can work with students to help ensure that they're doing everything that they need to do in order to be competitive for admission into the LEP eventually.
Now I want to shift a little bit from the actual process and now talk about recruitment. So another common topic that's up specifically in higher ed is, with many colleges and universities now offering virtual engagements for recruitment and outreach, how specifically is the University of Maryland currently or planning to, stand out in what seems to be a sea of webinars, virtual panels, chat rooms, how students are being, as I said before, bombarded with all of these e-campaigns and all of these engagements to join them virtually. And, what our listeners would love to know what UMD is, doing to stay at the forefront of this.
So just as we're asking students to work a little bit harder to differentiate themselves to us in the application review process, we are also trying to work a little bit harder to differentiate ourselves among the sea of colleges and universities that are vying for students' attention. The thing that I think is most helpful for students to know, number one, is that we are still here. Even though we are working virtually, the University of Maryland is open, is doing business, and is accomplishing the same things that it's always accomplished. That is true in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions as much as it is for any place else. If students have questions, if they want to interact, if they want to engage with staff in the admissions office, with current students at the university, even with the tour process, we have mechanisms in place to personalize the process. We are not simply trying to take what we did in the past and put it online. We've really taken a very close look at what it is that we offer students and tried to re-engineer it. Sebastian, that the university worked hard in order to ensure that putting classes online, having virtual classes, was something that was, engaging and innovative and creative and helping students learn as effectively in a virtual environment as they did in the classroom. We've tried to do the same thing with our recruitment process. So it's, if a student chooses to engage in one of our virtual recruitment activities, they're not going to just have talking heads. They're going to have an opportunity to interact with us. They're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. They're going to have an opportunity to do a virtual tour with current active, involved students at the university who are answering their questions, who are making sure that their particular needs are met. They'll have an opportunity to meet with admission counselors to answer questions that are specific to them related to the admission process. They'll have an opportunity to interact with currently enrolled students at the university. We're working on opportunities for students to even visit the campus. And we have a program that's called Chart for a Day, where students have had the opportunity to come to campus in the past and spend a day with a currently enrolled student. We're currently working now to create a mechanism for that to happen virtually. So we're not simply trying to, just sort of record an information session and have each student hit play. We're working very, very specifically to ensure that students can really experience the fullness, the roundness, the richness of the University of Maryland in this virtual environment, while also providing them with opportunities to talk to us. That's the thing that's essential in any year in the application process, particularly at a school that's as large as Maryland. I think people have the misperception that it's impersonal. We're working extremely hard to provide really beneficial personal interactions with students. And we're also doing some things that are creative. There's some things in the works that haven't come about yet that I think will make people go, really? Wow, that is so, I never would have thought of that. I encourage students and counselors and parents alike to keep their eyes focused on the University of Maryland and see what kinds of other creative things we're coming up with in the future.
So talking specifically about out-of-state and international student recruitment, public institutions around the country are currently facing lower levels or even predicted lower levels of enrollment from these populations due to, how the pandemic has developed and a lot of uncertainty events, specifically with regarding school. With this being the goal of some of even our key competitors here in the Big Ten, what are some of the new initiatives that we can look forward to recruit these populations?
So one of the things that is just really interesting this year, as challenging as it was for students, of course, it was challenging for admission officers as well to make sure that we met our enrollment goals. Believe it or not, our international student enrollment was up over last year. Like, who would have thought? But I think part of that is because of some of the things that I've already talked about, some of the personalization that we've tried to include in the process. We have individuals that are charged specifically with working with international student enrollment and making those connections. Often international students have questions that are a little bit different and much more personalized than other students may have. We have folks in place that are available and eager to work with them to help them navigate the process. In terms of domestic out-of-state enrollment, first of all, we are a state school, and we always spend a good part, if not most of our effort, working with residents of the state of Maryland, because that's who we are and that's what we do. But it's important to know that one of the things that we're concerned with is diversity, and that diversity is not just racial and ethnic diversity, though that is a very significant part of what we're interested in. It's also geographic diversity, and we want to make sure that we have students at the university who have viewpoints that are represented in the classroom that are formed from where they're coming from. So we want to make sure that we have students from a wide variety of places at the university as well. So we work very hard to ensure that our geographic diversity is as impressive as our in-state diversity is as well. So we have identified markets that we work in, and we're continuing to work in some of the out-of-state markets where we know students are interested in the university, are willing to travel to the University of Maryland, have the academic prowess that we're looking for. And we work really hard in those specific markets to make sure that we're able to attract students to the university. Coincidentally, as I mentioned before, our membership in Common App is something that we're hoping and already seeing will help us in those out-of-state markets. Again, access is really important, and becoming a part of the Common App, which allows students to apply for a variety of institutions through one application, is helping us to ensure that we're able to geographically diversify the University of Maryland, as well as, helping with other types of diversity as well.
During the fall semester, one of the biggest highlights that we have here at the university is the fall open house in October. This is currently and, has been in previous years kind of the pinnacle by many applicants to come and experience the university for a day, hear from admissions professionals like you and your team, from academic advisors, and even from current students about their lives here at the University of Maryland and what can they look forward to if they decide to apply and even hopefully deposit here. Mm-hmm. So are there any current plans as to how this will be, executed and delivered to our applicants in in the midst of all this new landscape we're all navigating?
As you can imagine, we've been working diligently to ensure that our fall open house experience, which will be called Explore Maryland, is as robust and beneficial to students as it always has been. We worked throughout the summer to make sure that we were going to be able to invite students to experience what the University of Maryland has to offer in this virtual environment. The good news is that we're pretty excited that we've been able to put together a program that will allow students to get the information that they want. One of the advantages of being in a virtual environment is that it does give the students and families a lot more control over what it is that they will see, when they will see it, how they will see it, that sort of thing. The other thing that is really advantageous about the program that we're offering is that our partners in colleges across the campus have also been working with us to ensure that the opportunities that they're providing to students are going to be really, really impressive. You know, we have an impressive university, and we want students to be able to see that and to learn about all of the things that make us as great as we say we are. And so our partners across campus have been working with us to do that. So we will have opportunities for students to really get to know about the university at large, but we will also have opportunities for students to interact with faculty, staff, and students in the individual colleges. There will also be opportunities for students to interact with folks in the living and learning programs so that they can see the living and learning programs and the excellent job that they do, not only academically with helping students to find their place at the university and to explore their individual talents and passions, but also to help make the big store small and to find their community at the university. So we'll have opportunities for that to happen, as well as opportunities for them to learn about how to finance their University of Maryland education. So we're excited. The program will be coming up soon. It's in the middle of October, so within the next couple of weeks, that's going to be happening. And we hope students that will take advantage of the opportunity to come and join us and learn about the University of Maryland.
So earlier this semester, the university also hosted the Counselor Conference, where high school counselors and community-based organizations come to UMD to learn more about our expectations, how to prepare their students for applying to just not only just college, but also specifically Maryland, and how they can better advise their students and prepare them for success beyond the classroom. I want to ask, how did that go this year, and what was it focused on, and what were some of the highlights from this year's event?
Believe it or not, well, first of all, it went really well. We had hundreds of counselors join us, both from community colleges and high schools across the country, to learn about the University of Maryland and the application process. But as I was starting to say, believe it or not, counselors have the same questions that students and their families have. So there were questions, and we spent a lot of time talking about Common App and the reason that we've decided to join Common App and add that to the Coalition app that we also accept for students to use to apply for admission to the University of Maryland. There were lots of questions about our application review process, how we're going to consider students who may have pass-fail grades, and how we're going to evaluate students for admission for those students who choose not to submit test scores. One of the questions that we've gotten from students, parents, and counselors is, does test optional truly mean test optional? There's concern about students feeling that they may be disadvantaged if they choose not to submit tests with the application. And we spent a lot of time talking with counselors to let them know that when we say test optional, we truly mean it. So students who apply for admission to the university are test optional. There is no disadvantage to a student who chooses not to submit test scores or to a student who hasn't had the ability to take a test. So we spent a lot of time talking about those things. We also want to make sure, as I talked about personalization and the opportunity for students and families to interact with us personally, we want to make sure that counselors know that they have that same opportunity as well. The word that comes to mind when I talk about interacting with counselors, or when I think about interacting with counselors, is partnership. I want them to realize that, first of all, we're working toward the same goal. We want to make this process as stress-free, easy, and understandable and accessible for their students as they do. And we want to make sure that they understand our philosophy and how we make our admission decisions. our holistic application review process has put us in a pretty unique position versus schools who didn't have a holistic review process prior to the onset of COVID-19. Because we have a holistic application review, we've already been in the position where we're looking at everything there is about a student, not just their grades and test scores. We're looking at who students are, where they're coming from, what opportunities have they had, how they've chosen to take advantage of those opportunities, what disadvantages have students had to navigate through, and how have those things impacted who the students are, what's their family circumstance, and what opportunities has that afforded to them, what disadvantages may that have caused them. And we want our counselors to know that because we have this philosophy about holistic application review, that we're looking at everything that they want us to take into consideration, we're taking into consideration. So we spent a lot of time talking about those kinds of things as a part of our counselor conference and helping ease the concerns and some of the angst that counselors have, which truly looks like the angst that students have as well.
And you talked a lot about, some of the new initiatives that we're doing to help both these populations. And I want to follow up on that and, see, has your office gotten any feedback from both counselors or students about some of the, not just biggest challenges, but also priorities or issues they're facing with this application cycle?
We've heard from students, families, and counselors that they appreciate the work that we're putting forth. We also have had feedback that the access to the kinds of things that we're providing has been beneficial. We've had students provide feedback about the tours that we've provided that have opportunities for them to interact with currently enrolled students. We've had great feedback about some of the student panels that we've provided so that students are the heart and soul of the university, and any opportunity that we can provide for prospective students to interact with currently enrolled students has been greatly appreciated. So it's kind of good to know that people have been paying attention to the things that we're doing, and people have indicated that they appreciate what we're doing, and in some instances have talked about the fact that some of the things that we're doing are very different, and they're getting different feelings than they have in participating in similar kinds of events at other institutions.
I want to now share some feedback that we got from one of our listeners. This came from a prospective student from Middletown, New Jersey, who was interested specifically in engineering and asked this question via Twitter. It reads, "For competitive programs like the School of Engineering, how are the factors like grades and test scores going to be weighed when some students have incomplete transcripts and others may just have more comprehensive grading depending on where they're coming from?" I know the School of Engineering weighs heavily on math and science as well as those STEM courseworks. So my question is, how will this impact the application review process?
One of the things that I've tried to emphasize every time I have an opportunity to talk to students, and I've talked a little bit about it in our conversation today, is that as large as the University of Maryland is, as many applications as we receive for admission into the university, we are looking at each student individually. We're not comparing students across the board. We're not looking to see what one student had the opportunity to do versus what another student didn't have the opportunity to do. We are looking at that one individual student. So we're looking at that student, what factors may have impacted them, either positively or negatively, and how that student has performed in light of their current circumstances or their previous circumstances related to COVID, related to other things as well. The one word that I think is most important related to how we make our admission decisions is context. Context matters. Who is the student? Where are they going to school? What could they do because of where they go to school? And what did they choose to do? So if a school offers a wide array of academically challenging courses and the student has chosen not to be enrolled in those academically challenging courses, that's telling. In the same situation, if a student has enrolled in a school that doesn't offer upper level courses and students couldn't take advantage of those courses, we're not going to penalize a student for that. So we're expecting a student to do the very best they can in the environment that they are in. So if a student is enrolled in a course, in a school, and because of COVID or because of something else that the school was challenged with, and they don't have letter grades or number grades, we're not going to penalize a student for that. If it's the case that a student is enrolled in a school that has every possible resource and every possible support system, every possible opportunity for students to be engaged both inside and outside the classroom, we're expecting that students have taken advantage of that and done well in those environments. So the context of who the student is and where they're coming from weighs exceptionally heavy in how we make our admission decisions.
Well, wonderful. So this next question that's come to us from a parent, I feel like your response may also be applicable to this. It reads, will the review for special programs like the Honors College or even merit scholarships be affected this year? These are already very competitive at UMD, and it seems like the landscape has changed so much, we don't really know what to expect for who is competitive and who isn't. So what do you say to this?
The same things matter in the review for those limited enrollment programs, for the review for living and learning programs, and the review for merit scholarships, as have always mattered. We are looking at the students' academic performance in high school. We're looking at their course selection. We're looking at how they compare to other students that they are enrolled in school with. So the information that school counselors provide to us is important. The information that their academic subject area teacher recommendation provides to us is important. And the information that they provide to us is important. It's never been the case, even prior to the currently challenging circumstances that we're living in, it's never been the case that a student could look at a document and say, yes, I meet this criteria, and yes, I'm going to be admitted to this. Yes, I'm going to receive this scholarship. Our process is a competitive process based on who has applied, based on the number of scholarships we have, or based on the number of spaces that we have in certain programs. It's always the case that students are competing among the pool of students that have chosen to apply for that particular year. But we're looking at the same kinds of things as we've always looked at. To that end, it's important that students do a good job of introducing themselves to us, helping us to understand who they are, helping us to understand where they're coming from, helping us to understand what their circumstances are, helping us to understand what the challenges are and what the opportunities are that they've had to navigate.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. I want to thank you again, Shannon, for joining us today. That's all the time we have. Tune in next time to hear about the two unsung heroes of the Clark School, fire protection engineering and material science. We also want to hear from you. Tweet us at FPEUMD or send us an email at enfp@umd.edu. Thanks for listening.